Okay, now hopping into the very first and easiest by far. It's not even a chapter. I'm not sure why that's what I was thinking about, but like the first section of the run, I guess, the prologue, where we learn how to jump and climb. Pretty crazy stuff here. The only important thing here, speed-wise, is jumping saves like a couple of frames because it speeds you up a tiny bit. And just jumping over and over throughout this level saves about a second, somewhere around there. So now moving into chapter 1. Now that we've got our dash, we can actually like do cool things and go fast. So basically, the main different types of movement in this game, there's basically two different types of dash jumps. You can dash and then jump right after the dash ends to allow yourself to keep the speed the dash gave you. And also, if you hold down while doing a dash jump, you'll do something known as a hyper that gives you less height and more speed or distance. And then also, if you jump right after your dash fully ends, you can do what is known as an extended dash jump or an extended hyper, where you keep your dash, but you still have all of the speed of the dash. And we can use that cross like large gaps and stuff. So another big thing here is a mechanic known as wall bouncing, where if you dash upwards vertically into a wall and then jump off of it while you're still in your dash, you'll get like a mini boost and experience more height and a little bit extra horizontal distance. Okay, now coming up in this room for both the runners, they're actually going to use something known as neutral wall jumping to climb up this wall here. So as long as you aren't holding a direction when you wall jump and then you hold towards the wall, you can actually climb up the wall slowly without using any stamina, which allows us to skip going to the other side of the room and saves a couple seconds there. We don't see that very often, but it does come into play several times. So now, as both of these runners are moving into Chapter 2, we're actually going to see them go for a cutscene skip really soon. So basically coming up in a couple of rooms, in the very next screen for vorpal. Oh, unfortunately, it takes a death there. So if you set up this cutscene so you skip it while you're high enough that your vertical position is like within the dream block there, it'll teleport you horizontally into the dream block in the cutscene, and you can just dash through it. So also, we're in Chapter 2 now. Big new mechanic of these dream blocks. While you're in them, you basically have the speed of your dash the whole time, and you just need to be careful to not like hit a wall while inside a dream block, because that'll kill you. And now on GDTog's side, he's entered the battle and fight. Basically, she follows you 3 seconds behind you. Most of the time, it's not a big deal, but it can cause a bit of trouble in the last couple of rooms because there's some decent backtrack. Because we're forced to do a little bit of backtracking. And it looks like GDTog at least getting through that first room just fine. The second one also can cause some issues. But no, it looks like he got through it just fine. Let's see how vorpal does. Ooh, okay. He took a bit of a different path from what I'm used to. But that's actually really interesting. Because of the path he took earlier, he could just go under the Badlands. Oh, unfortunate. He barely missed the coin. That's actually a really great save, though. Okay, I'm scared. What? That's crazy. I would have died like 6 times there, but wow. Great save from vorpal. And at the end of this chapter here, I didn't really talk much about it because it's mostly just pure movement. There's no risk of dying here unless you like dream block into a wall, which doesn't happen very often, but I've done it way too many times. So now moving into chapter 3, we have these fun cycle-based enemies here. You can see moving up and down, the dust bunnies. I can't remember their actual name. I'm such a bad commentator, dude. Why? So mostly the hard rooms of chapters 3 consist of things like this, where there's a ton of these guys, and you just have to make a pretty tight cycle. But fortunately, there's tons of alternate strats because of the fact that this chapter is so cycle-based. So you can like play whatever way you want. And also this chapter introduces these blue key switch doors. They're not really a huge mechanic, kind of similar to a lot of other things earlier in this game, but they actually do show up in several other chapters later. Actually, I think they show up in like every single chapter later, except maybe Reflection, so I'm just dumb. But now GDTog's moving into the huge mess section. This section is pretty challenging, not because like you have to hit a bunch of hard cycles, but just because movement through this super cluttered room is really annoying. Yeah, actually there's like a ton of these key blocks or coin things. I never realized how many of them there were because I kind of just go through these rooms without paying attention. Also, a small thing that GDTog just did there, basically the way spikes work in this game is as long as you're moving away from them, they won't kill you, so we can kind of do a wall jump off of those spikes there. It's kind of precise, but it's not too bad if you've like put a bunch of practice into it. Also, another important thing to note about this huge mess section is that our movement and like what order we do these 3 different sections in is based on how far we have to go to talk to Oshiro between each section. So like right here, you can see GDTog is just going to fall right next to Oshiro, and he'll be able to move on to the next section very quickly. And vorpal also getting his spike jump after having a little bit of trouble because he had a bit of too much speed when he entered the room, which can easily cause issues. So now that we've cleaned up the mess here, we get this key and then talk to Oshiro, excuse me, and we move into probably one of the hardest parts of, or I'm not going to say one of the hardest parts, but the difficulty here does like increase. And the really important thing about this section coming up here is not only are these rooms arguably harder, but a lot of them are much longer, and taking a death can easily lose you like 10 seconds in some of these, especially towards the end. So now coming up in this next room for GDTog, he's going to try to do some, basically a chain a series of hypers together on those platforms. That's very nice. Saves a couple of seconds there, but any time save is worth it. And this room right here that GDTog's in is one of the longest in this chapter. It's not super challenging, but it's easy to mess up sometimes. And now he's moving into the Oshiro fight, just as vorpal is finishing up his huge mess section. So basically, this boss fight, he just attacks you from the left. He's not a huge deal until the last couple of rooms here. We see him like go past us once there, but really he's not a hassle until the very last room. As long as you're going as fast as possible here. So now this very last room of the Oshiro fight that GDTog's in right now, this is a really famous room in Celeste speedrunning because it is very common to die late into this room and lose like over 10 seconds. It is not very fun sometimes. Okay, and there vorpal gets the chained hyper jumps in order to get his key quickly. Good from him. So now GDTog's moving into Chapter 4. Main new mechanics here are these green bubbles. They're green, they're not blue. And they basically just allow you to get like an extra 1 dash's worth of distance in a direction. And then the other cool, fun new mechanic that everybody loves here is this wind. And it just makes movement painful and unfun. But also it opens up some like cool strats for some of these rooms. And now vorpal's about to move into his very last screen of the Oshiro fight, so hopefully this goes well for him. Ooh, bit of a close call there. Also, GDTog's doing another spike jump there to save a couple of seconds. Just as vorpal gets through his Chapter 3. That's actually a very solid time for his PB. So an interesting thing here on GDTog's side is we can use the momentum from this auto-scroller block. Casually, you're supposed to wait for it and just like grab it and let it push you across that pit. But we can use the extra speed it gives us to make that jump. But really the main important thing about Ridge here is the addition of the wind makes some of these harder and longer rooms like very challenging, and so it's just important to make sure the runners can deal with that really well, because it basically doesn't show up anywhere else in the game except for the section of Summit based on this. Okay, and now vorpal's going for his spike jump here. He's having a bit of trouble, but he's got the position for this jump down. Okay, there it is. Nice. And now GDTog has moved into the harsh wind section. This wind is much more annoying than before. And there's also the addition of these snowballs, which are basically just a harder version of Oshiro. Ah, that stinks. A death at the very end of that room. Ah, that's awful. And also, this room, most runners are not accustomed to the death cycle. But as I was saying, the snowballs are kind of like a harder version of Oshiro, as they come from the right and don't give you as much of a warning. But now GDTog is done with the snowball section, and he's moving into the final screen of Chapter 4. He should be fine. There's not really any risk of dying in this room at this point. Yes, okay. And he finishes up his Chapter 4. So now moving into the Mirror Temple here, the two big new mechanics are the dash blocks that you'll see in this next room. Basically, dashing moves them quickly to their second position. They're kind of similar to the zipper blocks in Chapter 1, except these actually play a much bigger role. And those red bubbles you saw there, they're very similar to the green bubbles, except they keep moving in one direction until you either dash out of them or hit a wall. Ah, vorpal is... Oh, nice. He can actually save that. That's kind of crazy. Had a bit of trouble in that room, but manages to pull it off. And on GDTog's side, he tried to use the momentum from one of these dash blocks to be able to skip some movement in that room, but unfortunately bonks his head and is unable to make it to the end of that room. So now Vorpal is moving into the harsh wind section of Chapter 4. He's going to have some fun with snowballs in just a couple seconds. Oh, that's quite an unfortunate death. He just barely snuck over that moving platform there. And as he starts to deal with these snowballs, GDTog moves into this Seeker section of Chapter 5. These are a big enemy that show up later in this chapter. But first we get introduced to them by being them and killing Madeline. So now coming up in this very next room for GDTog is the first actual Seeker we see. They basically do what their name says, and they seek you out. They just like go straight for you and try to kill you. But the fortunate thing is we can use them to collect these coin blocks, and we can also use like the explosion that happens after killing them to collect them, like you might see there. Oh no, he actually just knocks the corpse right into that. Nice. And Vorpal finishes up his Chapter 4 now, so he'll be moving on to the Mirror Temple really soon. So now coming up in the next room for GDTog is the biggest skip in the game. It saves like over a minute. It's known as search skip. So basically here, by doing a reverse dash, extended dash jump, we can skip a big gap that normally you're supposed to use a bubble from the other side to get across. But that would also require us to get like 2 whole keys. And that takes too long, so we just skip it. So now GDTog's moving on to the hardest section of Chapter 5, the Theo section. So this is probably the most varied like gameplay gets in any section of the whole run, because we have to carry this guy, and it really adds like a whole new dimension to movement, because while you're holding him, you can't dash. So in order to move fast, you have to throw him and then dash, or dash and then pick him up. And we've still got all of these annoying seekers attacking us, and it just makes some of these rooms very hard. But fortunately, in a lot of these rooms, we can still like use the same speed mechanics and abuse the same things, like this dash block here, in order to get a lot of speed. Unfortunately, GDTog's unable to pick up Theo there, but if you do that correctly, you can just skip through the whole room off of that one dash platform. Okay, and now he's done with any risk of death in this chapter. He's just got to make it through this last room. These waves that push you back can be pretty annoying to deal with. And you can probably see he's having a little bit of trouble with them. But he gets through the room just fine and finishes up his chapter, just as Vorpal is now moving into his Seeker section of the chapter. Oh, unfortunately, he was just a little bit too low on that block, and he takes a death there. So now GDTog's moving into Chapter 6. Big new mechanic here are these feathers. They're really interesting and change up the movement a lot. Actually, kind of like Theo. Big skip here. Oh, nice. Gets it first try. So that's known as lake skip. By either wall bouncing underwater, or like he did, or you can actually just climb up the wall on the left. You can hit a precise wall bounce on those spikes, even though you actually don't even jump off the spikes there, and save a couple of seconds of movement by just like skipping the whole room. So the other new mechanic of this chapter are these crush blocks, or Kevin blocks, that GDTog's traveling on here now. They're pretty self-explanatory, but we can also use them to get a lot of momentum in several rooms, like we'll hopefully see coming up in this next room for GDTog. Right here. Okay, and now Vorpal's done with his Seeker section, so he's going to be coming up to Search Skip soon. And then also Theo. And nice, he also gets Search Skip first try. Oh, unfortunately takes a death to the Seeker at the very end of that room. But it looks like at least he doesn't have to deal with that Seeker this time, as he's too low. Oh, nope, I shouldn't have said anything. I shouldn't have said anything. Okay, it's fine. The Seeker's dead. We're all okay. So now coming up into this next room for GDTog, we're going to be doing a series of developer-intended shortcuts to get through this room really quickly. They're relatively precise though, but we can set up the first two by holding against the walls there, and then we kind of just have to fall through the spikes. Unfortunately, there's no setup for that, and also because we fall through the first two spikes, we skip 2 checkpoints earlier in the screen, and dying takes you back to the very start. But fortunately, now that he's taken a death in the underwater section, most of the time you shouldn't die in the underwater section, but sometimes dashes just don't go the right direction. And now he's about to do something known as the Battle and Boost, where he's going to use his momentum and the moving of this block. Oh, no. Looks like, unfortunately, he doesn't get it, but you can use the momentum of that to jump all the way into the boss fight here. So now he's in this battle and boss fight. It's just like it's just like any other like normal boss fight in a video game. You know, you run directly into your enemy and it kills them. And it also gives you your dash back, which allows us a lot of opportunities for like fast movement and stuff. But most of the time we just use it to get to the ground faster, so we can hyper or like do whatever to gain our speed. Oh, vorpal, having a close call, almost saved it there, but this room is very challenging if you can't like get through the very start with the fast strat. Unfortunately, almost makes it and then just gets barely caught by the Seeker. But it looks like he's through this time. And now he's just moving on to the last couple of rooms of the Theo section as GDTog moves into the last couple of rooms of the first half of the battle and boss fight. This is actually the last room of the first half here. So now as he moves into the second half, Battling just like starts moving blocks more. There are moving blocks earlier, but they're not really important to the screens themselves. Oh no, vorpal just barely getting crushed there. He's having some really like close calls and weird encounters in these Thea rooms. And now GDTog's in the very last 2 rooms of this battle and fight here. So these rooms are mostly simple, but they are very long, so dying in them loses like 15 seconds if you take a really bad death. Okay, nice. It looks like vorpal should be safe to make it through his Theo section right as GDTog finishes up the final end of the battle and fight. So now he's leveled up and has a second dash, which we can use a little bit to help us wall boost and scale this vertical wall. And it'll be a really big factor in Summit coming up now. So vorpal finishes up his Chapter 5, GDTog finishes up his Reflection. So now the basics of Summit. For the main, like, first, like, 2/3 of the level, they're based on previous chapters. So this first section here is based off of chapter 6, which we just played through, and now and then it goes through the chapters in like normal order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it looks like vorpal is deciding not to go for lake skip. That's very fair. It is a very challenging skip. Great job to GDTog for getting that first try. The other important thing about Summit is because we have 2 dashes now, these rooms are all built around that, and there's a lot less floor and safety. And in general, these rooms are built around dashing more and being on the ground very little. Also, an important thing to mention about this 500 meter section of Summit are the zipper blocks that are from Chapter 1 play a much bigger role. I think we only use like 1 in Chapter 1, but we're required to use at least 3 or 4 here. But now GDTog's moving into the 1,000 meter section. So these dream blocks actually have some pretty cool mechanics because you have 2 dashes. Interestingly, you can actually jump out of the end of these, and there's actually a pretty tight timing for it, but you can also hyper dash out of these. And doing that over the course of this chapter allows you to save a couple seconds. But it is pretty precise. Okay, it looks like GDTog is just elected to not go for that. That's definitely fair. So now he's moving into the 1,500 meter section of Summit. Probably the hardest, or like the second hardest part, arguably, with the very end of Summit. But a lot of these rooms are very challenging and long and can cause a lot of pain. Also, interestingly, on vorpal's side, he's taking a different path in Reflection than GDTog did. There's a couple of rooms there where you could either go up or down, and he decided to go up at the end where GDTog went down. And both of those paths are very similar in speeds, if I remember correctly. Also, you can see here on GDTog's side, this screen is very long, and unfortunately he took a death pretty close to the end. So now vorpal's going to fall through this room, hopefully get his shortcuts first try. He gets the first 2, and yes, there it is, through that. So now the 2,000 meters section brings back everybody's favorite mechanics of the wind and the even the snowball for one room. And also has a couple of great auto-scrollers. Oh, unfortunately, GDTog takes a death to these snowballs. The snowball cycle in this room can be very annoying. But actually here, GDTog can do a bit of an auto-scroller skip by using the speed of the auto-scroller, or like the moving block once again to gain some speed. We can skip like the whole second half of waiting for that block to move. Okay, and now Vorpal is moved into the battle and fight. Unfortunately, he had a couple of deaths on his way to the fight, which cost him a pretty decent amount of time. But hopefully, he does not have that same struggle in the fight itself. Unfortunately, I definitely commentators cursed him, and I'm a bad person. Oh, unfortunately there. So Badeline kind of has a weird hitbox sometimes. Like, sometimes if you're kind of close to her, you'll hit, and then other times you, like, pass, like, a pixel past her and don't even, like, get close. It's just weird. But also in this next room, for GDTog, he's going to go for another spike jump here. By holding neutral here and doing 2 precise wall jumps, we can skip having to go down and use a red bubble once again to just get that key nice and quickly, and now he can move on to the rest of this level. So now coming up in the very next room for GDTog is a pretty small skip known as door skip. Unfortunately, takes a death there. It saves like 1 second. It either saves 1 second or 9 years. I'm not 100% sure. I need to ask someone about that. But it looks like he gets it second try. Vorpal is having some very close calls with these bumpers here in this battle and fight, but fortunately he does make it through that room without dying. So now GDTog is on the 3,000 meters section of Summit. This is like not based on any previous chapter and is its own fun thing. And because it's its own fun thing, it kind of brings back the wind mechanic from chapter 4, except it's even worse because it blows down, and basically that just increases your gravity and is not a big fun time. Okay, but Vorpal, with a little bit of trouble, does successfully make it through the first half of the battle and fight here. Okay, but it does look like both these runners are sadly... As I say that, they both die at, like, the end of a long section. I'm going to never talk again, dude. Okay, but now GDTog is done with the downdraft section of Summit, and he's moving into this upwards wind. Basically, this wind, instead of, like, being the really annoying and hard downdrafts, is super nice and adds some floaty jumps and dashes and allows you to cover much more distance. Okay, but Vorpal makes it through the last couple of rooms, basically unscathed. He had 1 death at the start of the last room, but that's not a big deal. So now he's leveled up, and he is done with Reflection now, as GDTog is just about to move into the very final section of 3,000 meters here. Unfortunately, just barely not far enough to the left, so he takes a death to those spikes. So now in this final section, we have a couple of checkpoints that come up really quickly, and then two pretty challenging flags here. But as long as you don't die on them, they should be like relatively the same speed most of the time. I'm not good at talking, I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is they're punishing. Okay, and he looks like he's done with flag 2 now, onto flag 1, so he should be safe. Should be no more risk of death here. Makes it past the last spikes, and he reaches the top of the summit, finishes with a 28, 33? Is that a 3 or 2? I can't tell. Ah, it is just barely a 23. Okay. I might have said 33 too, because I'm weird. Still, though, very solid for him, and he does win the race, moving him up to 5-1 in this group stage so far. So at this point, it is definitely safe to assume that he has made it out of his group. And apparently he's trying to tell us some secret message. I don't really understand what he's saying. But he should be coming in just a couple of minutes for an interview, hopefully. Okay, so it looks like we do have GDTog in here.
Hi.
So how do you feel after that race?
It was worse than last night, but not like... It was like the polar opposite. It's like my last night I had a really good like early and mid game, and then tonight I had a pretty mediocre early game. No, really bad early game, and then like mediocre average mid game, and then my end game was really good. My chapter 6 was really good, and up till 3,000 meters, my my summit was really good too.
Nice. So like there's just like the city stuff that happened.
Okay, so here's something I should probably mention right now. When I was in the middle of chapter 4, I don't remember where exactly. Oh, the screen with the wind pushing you to the right. You hyper off the floor, and then you dash twice. You lose your stamina, you fall onto one of the crumble blocks, and then you dash out of it.
Oh, yeah!
Okay, did you see what happened in that room?
What happened? Because it felt like you were trying to, like, do something, and it just didn't happen.
Literally, something in my D-pad popped. Like, literally the screen before that, something in my D-pad popped. And then I tried to, like, extended hyper there, and it just wasn't working. And I was like, do not tell me my controller is breaking. I panicked. Like, I freaking panicked, dude. I was so scared. And then, like, if you saw me screw up a bunch of other... Well, yeah, in the room after that, too. Like, I kept messing up because I was nervous, because I was like, dude, I think my controller's broken. Like,
and that, everyone, is why you run on keyboard.
I'm so butt on keyboard. It's just, like, I wouldn't even try. But, like, yeah, I think... The worst thing to go through your head would be during a race would be like faulty equipment or a possibility of faulty equipment. And yeah, that happened. So I think it's probably going to be time to get a new controller soon. Very soon.
See, fortunately, I play on keyboard, the best way to play this game. So I've never really had any trouble with that. But it seems like controller issues are pretty common.
I'm gonna hit you.
That's not very nice, okay? I commentated your race.
You act like keyboards are all holy and never have problems. Well, they're technology too.
I've never had trouble with my keyboard.
I've never had trouble with the keyboard either, really, so you know.
That's just proof that, you know, controllers are bad.
I mean, I guess that's why I have a 36 and not a 33 like you, right?
I mean, my 33 is also bad. Hopefully I'll 32 soon, so then I won't have a 33. But that's not important. So wait, what was your chapter 6 time?
6:59.
Oh,
Literally
yeah,
a second below sub 7.
You know, really, all sub 7s are the same. It doesn't matter as long as it's a sub 7.
It's true. I mean, that's my first sub 7 chapter 6 in the tournament. I'd like to think that that's probably my best like chapter, my best IL like out of all the chapters so far this entire tournament. No, that's a lie. Actually, sorry. My PB summit. I forgot about that, but that would be up there for sure. Because my 950 summit was definitely the highlight of my the tournament so far for me.
Oh, 950. That's pretty fast.
It was very good. Alright, continue your talk. I can't speak English. Continue your commentary. I'm gonna go grab the hearts and do the core again.
Okay, so now vorpal is moving into the very fun wind and snowball section of 2,000 meters here. Unfortunately, just like judging from earlier in his summit, he has had like several deaths in a couple of the harder rooms. And like it makes sense because they are the harder rooms, but it still stinks. And I've been there, like, myself in the past. Oh, no! The very end. I feel like one important thing I can kind of tell from, like, just watching him in general is he's, like, a lot more practiced and more comfortable with the early levels. But he's still making it through the summit here on pretty okay pace. Okay, that was a pretty crazy save. I'm not sure how he pulled that off. Actually, I feel like all of these saves, like when you just look at them like themselves, they're actually pretty simple, but I would have never thought like to do that, so they're impressive to me. Ooh, it looks like vorpal actually taking an alternate strat at the start of 2,500 meters here, and he's going to use this bubble to skip through the first 2 rooms here. That's not a strat you see very often, but it is still a definitely not a horrible option.
See, my D-pad is still having problems. Like, this is an issue, like, big time.
And he's also just going down to take this bubble. Doesn't even have to worry about the key skip here. Oh, unfortunately takes a death at the very end of this room. It seems to unfortunately be happening for him quite often. There have been like a ton of times. Oh, just again right there. Tiny bit too close to that platform before he dashed. Okay, and it looks like he is deciding to not go for door skip. So he might possibly be losing 9 years here, but hopefully not. I'm not 100% sure how much that saves.
Actually, the run's invalid now, so...
No. Wait, so how much time does it save?
Literally all of it.
Oh, is that how time works? Well, I'm not going to believe this guy. He's probably just, like, bullying vorpal because he won the race or something like that.
Don't make me look bad!
Well, really, you're the one making yourself look bad.
Sure, well, yeah, but yeah.
So now Vorpal moving in the final section of Summit here. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he'll be able to PB this, but this can still be his best race of the tournament so far. Okay, and he's actually made it through the majority of the downdraft section here without taking any deaths. That's very nice. Very different from how GDTog went through this section.
Yeah, my downdraft was butt. Literal garbage.
And nice, he actually makes it through the whole section without a single death. So now he's going through this updraft section here. Hopefully these rooms will be nice and forgiving and happy. Oh, unfortunately, just barely can't reach that edge there, so I cursed it once again. Okay, he makes it through that very long checkpoint there. I didn't want to say anything in case I killed him. Because so far today I seem to be doing that a lot with Vorpal. And now he's done with a large majority of the hardest parts of this 3,000 meter section. Just taking that safety flag there. He's about to move on to the very final section and say goodbye to the updrafts. Oh, I was about to talk. Okay, I need to stop like trying to curse this guy, but he's just coming into the last very couple of flags here. Hopefully, no more deaths. Unfortunately, just a little bit too much distance from that feather there, and just barely taps his head onto those spikes. Okay, but he just decides to take it safe and gets through there. It's now really the last checkpoint with any chance of death. Oh, unfortunately, he just dashed a tiny bit too early, so he does take one there. But now he makes it through. He's on flag 1, and we should be clear to finish the rest of the game deathless. Oh, unfortunately, he got stuck on like a tiny ledge. Basically, there's a small ledge that you like actually can't see because of the way the clouds are laid out. So I think he thought he was on the very top, and unfortunately he reset there to try to skip the cutscene. So he finishes out with a 54-52. A little off of his PB, but still not a bad run for him overall. And it is his fastest run of the tournament so far. Okay, and I'm going to see if vorpal wants to come in for an interview really quickly. Okay, it looks like it's not going to happen. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and close this off. So thank you everyone for watching. These races are always a lot of fun, both to run and to commentate. Shoutouts to Speed Gang for like making all this happen. It's so cool like how much speed gaming how much speed gaming stuff speed gaming does, dude. I am not good at talking, apparently. How much, like, speed gaming does for the speedrunning community. Also, make sure to follow the runners, because they're pretty cool and stuff. Feel free to follow me. And yeah, if you want to check out more of this tournament, there'll be a bunch of races tomorrow. They're not like on specific speed gaming channels yet, but be sure to check out the schedule. Also be sure to check out the other speed gaming channels, because there's always something going on. There's a bunch of tourneys going on right now, and more to come in the future. So I guess that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a nice day, and goodbye forever.